Every now and then I like to do these deep dive segments. So I've done one recently about Gloria Steinem. A lot of people tended to like that one. I'm not the only one that talked about Gloria Steinem, but I think I took a different perspective with it. I've done a deep dive about why there's no such thing as a self-made billionaire. And now it's time that I do one about Clive Davis. Clive Davis, music producer, founder of Arista Records. We have to dive into Clive. There are probably a number of things that you've heard about Clive Davis over the years, but you may not know about this one, right? What I'm going to talk about tonight. First and foremost, I want you to understand that the basis of this conversation is about exploitation. And it's not just Clive Davis at the end of the day, but he's the one we're talking about tonight. There were some things about Clive Davis that was just a little weird. Some things that he did that gave me pause. I don't know, like this moment. After Whitney Houston died, the decision that Clive Davis made to continue on with a pre-Grammy party, I thought that was kind of weird. Even Shaka Khan thought it was kind of weird. She spoke to Piers Morgan about this. Remember this?
You were, I think, going to go to the Clive Davis party.
Yes.
It was a surreal event where Whitney's body was still in the hotel, and there was this sort of party where apparently half the room were in tears, the other half were kind of partying. What did you feel about that?
I thought that was complete insanity. And knowing Whitney, I don't believe that she would have said, the show must go on. She was the kind of woman that was stop everything. I'm not going to be there. You know, I don't know what could motivate a person to have a party in a building where the person whose life he had influenced so enormously and whose life had been affected by her. So they were like, I don't understand how that party
I had Clive Davis by pure chance in here on Friday night with Jennifer Hudson, and he obviously worshipped Whitney, and I think he must have gone through agony when he heard this news, knowing it was 2 or 3 hours till this event.
Right.
And I think he took the decision to turn it into a tribute to her. And I understand that. I mean, he obviously was wrestling with the right thing to do.
That would have been right if it really was a true tribute, and and a true tribute, might have been a truer, a more honest tribute in my opinion, would have been maybe call everybody together, let's say a prayer, and let's eat dinner and go home. I couldn't get dressed. I was supposed to go to the party. I just got off a plane from Miami at about 5:30. As soon as I hit the tarmac, I found out, I heard, and I couldn't put on makeup. I couldn't get dressed. I couldn't do anything. I was paralyzed. I couldn't do anything.
Couldn't do anything, but Clive went on with the party. Just thought that was a little bit weird. Just seemed like Clive just wanted to, I don't know. Seemed like he just wanted to continue to find ways to make money, right? I don't know. That's what it seemed like to me. And there was something else too. That's one example. But there was something that Suge Knight said, which I think the more I keep finding out, I think people at some point are going to have to owe Suge Knight an apology. Suge Knight, owner of Death Row Records. There was something else that he said about Clive Davis. Now, of course, Suge Knight was talking about the whole Diddy situation at the time. I know people are going to laugh because it's Page 6, but this was actually, the conversation was on News Nation. I just had difficulty finding that video again. But, Suge Knight's been talking a bit, and he said something here that I think more people need to pay attention to. I see if I can make it bigger. I don't know where it went now. Or maybe it did go bigger. Okay. The highlighted part here. Suge Knight, the convicted felon, went on to allege that Clive Davis Russell Simmons and Andre Harrell used alcohol, drugs to compromise Sean Puffy Combs' manhood, allegedly. Davis, Simmons, and Harrell have never been charged with allegations made by Knight. But just because you haven't been charged doesn't mean these things didn't happen. The spokesperson added that Clive is a mentor to artists and in keeping with this, never ever condoned any such inappropriate behavior. So there have been many things that have been said about Clive Davis. But I would think if anyone would know, it probably would be Suge Knight, right? I think Suge knows some more things too, you know. So there's that. People have to remember Clive Davis was Diddy's boss. Just keep that in mind. So these are allegedly, don't know for sure. We don't know if Diddy's going to talk or not. But I want to ask you a question. I just found it pretty interesting that the feds came after Diddy, but they ain't come after nobody else around him. They ain't come after Clive Davis. Really? Or they didn't raid Clive Davis's house. Those are two examples that I said, there's some weird things about Clive Davis. But I did not know about this one. A couple nights ago, I watched this. I finally watched it. I watched the biopic, and then after that, I watched the new documentary of what happened to Milli Vanilli. Rob is no longer alive, but Fab is still alive. And in this new documentary, which I can't show on here, you get to hear from other people, not just Fab, but the people who worked at Arista Records, and they seem to have a different perception of how things went down. While everyone pointed their fingers at Rob and Fab, a lot of us did not know the full story. I was a kid when Milli Vanilli came out, but I remember the songs. We were just bumping and dancing to Girl, You Know It's True. And it was everywhere. It was everywhere. Girl, You Know It's True. Blame It on the Rain. Girl, I'm going to Miss You. We'll talk about where the song actually came from in a minute. But the part that I did not know about, which is mentioned in the new documentary, is that Clive Davis is also guilty. I want to take you back to the issue with the contract. Now, this is an interview. I don't know if you saw this. It was a couple years ago. This is Fab, who was a part of Milli Vanilli. At this time, he was having an interview with Pat from PBD Podcast. I just want you to hear what he says about the contract, and then I'll get into the background.
When we signed those papers, there was no attorneys. There was no managers. There was no support system.
Nothing.
We were just like eager beaver. Where? How high should I jump?
Got it. This is when you got $1,500.
That's right.
Is it $1,500 a piece or $1,500 total?
I can't recall. Maybe a piece. You
Okay.
know, so
Nothing crazy. Nothing
no,
crazy.
nothing
Just enough
crazy.
to maybe like get a...
just enough to go get some clothes, work on that hair. You know, because we had braids.
Did he suggest you go work on the hair? He
No.
can't-
That was
so
all.
the hair is all you and Rob.
Yeah.
Okay, you thought about that.
Yeah,
Because
we
everybody
thought about
wanted to have a unique look, so you wanted to have a unique look. So
That's right. That's
okay.
right. That's right.
Got it. So, and then he comes, you talk, Rob is furious, him and Frank go at it. And then at what point, so he's already told him what he has in mind. Here's a song, I'm going to get the voice, you guys will be the performers, you'll be the face, but someone's going to be
That's
singing
right,
it.
yeah.
So he told that to Rob.
Yeah, in a not
Paraphrasing, like,
paraphrasing, but he just told him, listen, you guys be the face.
That's it.
Yeah, you know.
So let's backtrack here and explain how things did transpire. So again, this is Fab. He was a part of the duo Milli Vanilli. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit to give you a little bit more context. So Rob and Fab were dancers. At the time, they were dancers in Germany. I believe, if I remember correctly, Fab was from France, Rob was from Germany, but they were, moving around trying to find gigs where they could. But the idea is that they did want to become famous. Like they wanted to become, a band. Like they wanted to really make it. And they were dancers, and dancers aren't paid that much, etc. They were living in a friend's attic or something like that at one point. Like, in other words, they didn't have permanent housing. They said sometimes they didn't have food to eat, etc. But they were trying to do like the artist's dream. There was this producer in Germany. His name was Frank Farian. Now, apparently Frank Farian discovered this other group during like the 70s disco era called Boney M, which I honestly had never heard of until I watched this documentary. And now I've been looking up all of Boney M's shit. So apparently Frank Farian discovered them, and Frank Farian said, wow, these guys are amazing. These guys are handsome. And if you go back and look back then, I think a lot of if you're young, maybe you don't know, but a lot of us know Milli Vanilli back then, they looked like models. Like they really did. Like Fab and Rob, they looked like models. So Frank Farian found the group and said, we're going to do a contract with you. So he's talking about the contract. Now, Fab is admitting that when they signed that contract, they didn't have a lawyer present. And from what I understand from the documentary, they didn't really read the contract either. People never let someone do this to you. But again, we're going to get to the exploitation part. The reason why this segment is more about Clive Davis instead of Frank Farian is because Frank Farian had fingers pointed at him. After this all came out, people did blame, like, how dare you? Like, you lied. Like, these people weren't singing, etc. Clive Davis is the one that got away with it, though. So Frank Farian signed them to this contract, and they said, great, when do we record? But Frank Farian did not want them to sing on the record. They were supposed to do one song, and that song just happened to be Girl, You Know It's True. He was going to use their face and their dance moves, because again, like I said, they were dancers, and they were going to lip sync to someone else's voice on the record. Now, lip syncing was not uncommon back then, whereas it wasn't uncommon to see someone on like, what is it called? Club MTV, or like MTV's The Grind, or like MTV Spring Break, where they would lip sync, but they would lip sync their own voice. With the case of Milli Vanilli, the voice on the song, Girl, You Know It's True, was not them. That was someone else who Frank Farian felt could really sing that song very well, but to his point, he felt didn't have the physical appearance that would really sell the song. There was another problem. The song wasn't Frank's song. The song actually came from a group in Baltimore, my hometown. And apparently, unless you were in Baltimore, you probably hadn't heard the song. So it came from this group in Baltimore called Newmarks. The story of Milli Vanilli's Girl, You Know It's True, from the Baltimore group whose song they borrowed. So this part here, again, this was Milli Vanilli. There's Rob, there's Fab. I told you again, they look like models, right? So it goes on to say here, forget for a minute that the two men that you thought sang Milli Vanilli Girl, You Know It's True didn't actually perform it. While you're at it, pretend it was not even their track. It says here, if you grew up in a certain part of Baltimore, DC, Maryland area in the mid 80s, you might have heard the hip hop group Newmarks. The crew of childhood friends, Sean, DJ Spencer, DJ Wayne, Kevin Lyles, Daryl Mims, and Rodney Cool Rod Holloman. They spent years trying to break into the local rap game as teens via local radio show and some self-released singles before their fortunes took an unexpected turn. So this is Kevin Lyles. So Kevin and his buds, they wrote that song, Girl, You Know It's True. Now, Frank Farian, the German producer, took that song and apparently like sped it up a little bit and added a little extra beat to it, which apparently legally you could do, but they would still have to pay them royalties. This is a whole other conversation. And when he signed Milli Vanilli, he said, I got this song for you. And he put on the song and the beat goes, dude, 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 dude. I'm in love with you, girl. Girl, you know it's true. It's actually a good song. Great song. But it wasn't Frank's song. Came from Kevin and the fam. Okay? Now, from what I understand, I think Kevin and them did go on to receive royalties after all this was settled. And Kevin is now doing very, very well. So we fast forward to Frank, because y'all gonna be mad at Frank after this, but I want you to be mad at Clive Davis too, okay? Don't go easy on Clive. Now we fast forward to what happened. So Milli Vanilli, they released the single in Europe first, and it really takes off. It soars all across Europe, and it gets to the point where it became so big in Europe, they're like, they want it in the US. Now we got a problem. Because first of all, it was never supposed to get that big anyway. Second of all, it wasn't their song. But more importantly, Milli Vanilli, Rob and Fab, they weren't singing that song. The people that were singing the songs are the people right here in this video. This is Johnny right here to the left. It was his voice. And it was also this guy's voice. These were the people who were singing on the album. Now, let's get back to what I was talking about, because I don't want to confuse people. You're probably wondering, why would they agree to sing a song and not have themselves be represented in the music video or anything like that? Why would they just want to sing and be hidden? So Frank Farian paid the money. And from what I understood from the documentary, again, it was only supposed to be that one song, and it was never supposed to turn into this big thing, but it did, because women saw Milli Vanilli on TV and they lost their shit. The chicks were like, oh my God, not only can they sing and dance, but they're gorgeous too. Then they found out they were European and they're like, oh my God, they have accents. You guys know how this works. So it took off. Then they had to go to the States. They went to LA. They met with Arista Records. And this is where Clive Davis comes in, because he owns Arista Records. Now, all of a sudden, instead of that one song, they signed with them in the States, even though Frank Farian had an agreement that all the music had to be recorded in the German studio. Again, it was only supposed to be one song. Now, Arista Records says, we need you to make more songs. We got to have more songs. You're too popular. They want an album. It can't just be a single. So Milli Vanilli had to go back to Germany to record Blame It on the Rain, Girl, I'm Gonna Miss You, and other songs. And what was odd about this is typically the producer, the American producer, would have been able to go into the studio with the artist. But Frank Farian had a rule that no one was to be allowed in his studio but the people that were the artist. So apparently Arista Records went along with this role, allegedly. The reason why nobody else was supposed to be in the studio was because Frank Farian didn't want Arista Records to see who was really singing these songs, which it wasn't Milli Vanilli. Let's fast forward and then we'll get to the confession here, because we ain't done yet. Milli Vanilli, these guys went back into the studio and then they did more songs. And at some point they kind of like, I thought it's supposed to be one song. Okay, we'll do more songs. Milli Vanilli blew the F up in the United States, across the world. They sold millions and millions of albums. They were topping the charts, whether it was Girl, You Know It's True, Blame It on the Rain, Girl, I'm Gonna Miss You. Like, it was every song they put out continued to top the charts. And then something else happened. Then Arista Records say, now you got to go on tour. You can do the Club MTV tour. So there's just one problem. They weren't singing these songs. So the other problem that you run into again is that now they have to find a way to perform these songs on tour without actually singing them. So they have to lip sync during the tour. Now, Club MTV was a little bit more cool with that because, like I said, a lot of the artists were dancing as well and not just singing. So it wasn't uncommon for people to lip sync to their songs while they're dancing, really hard on stage. So they were able to get away with it with Club MTV. And then one day something happened. The tape skipped. And it said, girl, it's girl, it's girl, it's girl, it's right in front of all of these people. And fans were like, oh my God, they're not really singing, as if you guys thought all those people were really singing all the other time anyway during this tour. But that still didn't mean that they didn't sing on the album. So there was a little bit pushback. They were lip syncing and they're like, they just played it off. No big deal. Something else happened after that, though. One of their managers at Arista Records thought that Milli Vanilli should be nominated for a Grammy. This was a big problem. It was a problem because the Grammys are different, unlike any other music award show. Unlike Billboard Music Awards, the Grammys are based on artistic merit. That means you actually have to sing. When you go to perform at the Grammys, you cannot use a tape. You cannot lip sync. You have to actually sing. He submitted them for a Grammy nomination, and everyone at Arista Records became very upset. Why would they get angry? Why would they get angry unless they knew? This manager says in the documentary that he had no idea. He didn't know that they weren't actually singing. And everyone in the company got mad at him because he submitted for. Then what makes it worse? Let's fast forward. Guess what? They actually were accepted for a nomination for Best New Artist. So Milli Vanilli was in a category with Nia Cherry. We're talking about Buffalo Stance Nia Cherry. They were in a category with Tone Loc, the Indigo Girls. And they won. They had to perform at the Grammys. According to Frank Farian's girlfriend, who handled the finances behind the scenes here over in Germany, she contacted the guy who was in charge of, I guess, the nominations at the Grammys. And she said she allegedly paid him money, bribed him to let them play the tape at the Grammys so that Milli Vanilli don't have to sing live. And ladies and gentlemen, he did it. So they went to the Grammys. They performed on that stage and they were lip syncing just like they had before. And Fab from Milli Vanilli said he believes that everybody in the crowd knew that they weren't singing on that stage. Money talks, honey. Now, something changes, right? Milli Vanilli really wanted to sing. They wanted to sing. But Frank Farian, producer in Germany, said, no, you cannot sing because it's in your contract. Now we go back to that video with Patrick Bet-David. They didn't have a lawyer with them when they signed the contract. So there was a back and forth push between Milli Vanilli and Frank Farian in Germany. Frank Farian decided to put his foot down and say, that's it. I'm killing this. I'm blowing the whistle on it. I'm going to out Milli Vanilli. These guys over here, this guy here with the glasses and dude over here with the glasses, they were kind of pissed off too, because they were very upset that something that was supposed to be just one song and on the hush turned these two guys into mega superstars. They're getting Grammy awards. They're making millions of dollars. And so the gentleman over here to the right came out publicly and said, that's my voice. but nobody believed him. He's in the documentary too. Frank Farian comes to America and holds a press conference and announces during that press conference that Milli Vanilli, Rob and Fab did not sing any of the songs on that album. And after that, Milli Vanilli were done. Talk about a public embarrassment. Listen to what Frank said, and then I'll get to the other part about Clive Davis. Listen to this.
The idea, I think it was a crazy idea, and Rob and Fab comes in the very early in '88. He comes in the studio, or in the end of '87. He has an idea when you have maybe it's something possible for demos that was very bad, and they looks very great. And I think maybe in the next time we have an idea for you. And then we created the music. Girl, you know it's true. The name was finished and the music was finished, and then make one click in my mind, and the crazy idea was born. Yeah.
It's very embarrassing. Yes, FM. I'm going to get to the exploitation part. It's very embarrassing. So that was Frank Farian, and that was him explaining how the events transpired. Frank Farian, basically, long story short, he was using black artists to make a lot of money, and then he just tossed these guys under the bus. Under the bus. They were young. They didn't really understand what they were even getting into. And this is not to say, well, you know, you guys should have known what you were doing wasn't right. But remember what they thought they were signing, that this was just supposed to be one song and that they would eventually get to sing. And then Frank said, no, in your contract, it says that you can't sing. A little bit more here.
We make the second album of Milli Vanilli. Exactly, we do make the same job in 2 years ago. And we created 12 new songs, and the album is finished, and we involve new singers. That's Ray, and I think it's a good album, and I think it's fair. We show everybody where is the real singer.
Yeah. So these were the real singers. So now after he outed everything, then he's like, I want to show everybody who the real singers were. And then they went on to create an album as well, right? All of this could have been avoided, but Frank was trying to make money. And the reality is Frank knew he could make more money with those two guys, Rob and Fab, just based on their looks and their dancing skills alone, than he could on the real performers. Now we get to the Clive Davis part. Because Frank had fingers pointed at him, but people need to point their fingers at Clive Davis. And I want to bring in this part here. 11 things you may not know. And we just want to go to the one part about Clive, this part right here. Because people be lying and Sabby don't like. Okay. Clive Davis knew about the con. Legendary music exec Clive Davis was the head of Arista Records when Arista became Milli Vanilli's stateside label. The former label employees say it's normal for a label rep to be in the studio during the recording of an album, but no one from Arista was permitted in the studio in Germany during the recording of Girl, You Know It's True. While they found it strange, they didn't pursue it further. If an outside producer sees the album credits, you have to take it on good faith that it represents what actually happened in the studio, says one former exec. Clive long maintained he had no idea the duo were a fraud, but the documentary alleges the contrary. A former senior VP of Arista claims Clive knew 6 months before the Grammy Awards. Let me back it up. When you watch the documentary, they play the recording from the senior VP of Arista, former senior VP of Arista. So it's not a written statement. It's the voice of him saying, Clive Davis knew 6 months before they were nominated for the Grammy that they were not singing on the album. I want to say it again. Clive Davis knew 6 months before the Grammy nomination, before the Grammys, that Milli Vanilli were not the people that were singing on the album. It was not their voice. That means that Clive Davis had plenty of time to recorrect, but Clive Davis chose not to. Clive Davis wanted to make money. And when all this hit the fan, everybody pointed fingers at Milli Vanilli, at Robin Fab, and Frank Farian, but Frank Farian was over in Germany. These two guys were still in the US at that point in time, and they still had to deal with the BS. Clive Davis left these guys out to dry. Clive Davis was nowhere to be found, claimed he had nothing to do with this, which is bullshit. Watch the new documentary. And nobody pointed fingers at Clive. It was an exploitive situation. He used these guys. He knew he could get the money from them. You mean to tell me the same guy who sat up there and helped discover Whitney Houston, one of the greatest voices ever, in my opinion, this same guy sat up there and profited off of a group that he knew was not fucking singing at all. And they refused to let them sing. So Milli Vanilli did the right thing and decided to hold a press conference to respond to the fans. This is after people burned their t-shirts and ran over their CDs and all that jazz. And they had to give their Grammys back. I want you to hear something that they said.
Backlash against you.
Backlash?
Yeah.
Can you repeat your question, please?
How do you feel about the fans' backlash? You know, running over your records, returning them.
Yeah, I understand. I really understand them. I have to say, I understand them. Milli Vanilli will have no chance anymore. But we ended it. Robin Fab ended Milli Vanilli, not Frank Farian. We told him, if we can't sing on our record, you have to go on the press and say that we don't sing, because we couldn't break out of our contract. Just the producer can stop the contract. The artist, for us, it would be difficult to stop a contract and try to release other albums with other producers, with other record companies. So we had to pressurize him that he stepped back, but we finished this game.
How can you expect anyone?
Do you guys hear what he was saying? So this is Rob over here to the right. Rob is no longer living, by the way. After all this happened, Rob kind of sank into a deep depression, went through, substance abuse. And ultimately, from what I understand, from what I read, it sounds like he, ended it all for himself. But that was Rob. And this is Fab over here to the left. So what Rob was trying to explain is that we can't get out of the contract. Only the producers can do that. And so once again, this is something that Clive Davis could have helped with. But once this all came out and he knew, he let these guys out to dry. You guys know Rob ended up getting arrested, going to jail, all this kind of stuff that happened. And it's all about exploiting people, because Clive Davis cared more about making money. Frank Farian cared more about making money, boo. That's all they wanted was the money. They didn't give a fuck. When they were down and out, they had no money. When they lost all that shit, you think these people called them to see how they were doing? Here today, gone tomorrow. That's the business, kid. And it's not just the music business. But another thing here, I do want you guys to hear from Fab, just another confirmation that Clive Davis knew, because it drives me crazy that no one is pointing fingers at Clive Davis. Listen to this.
I knew that look. They were looking at us like, oh. And then Clive knew, he knew all along. But the executives who didn't know, they were kind of like surprised. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. They don't know, but now they know. So, and then it lasted as long as it lasted. And the Milli train kept going, and it went quick. We made over $300 million. With that money was reallocated to new investments like new labels, Clive Davis, LaFace Record, Bad Boy Records, So Def, all those labels, and
Did everybody hear what he just said? So the money that Milli Vanilli made under Arista Records, what he's saying is Clive Davis he took that money and created other labels like Bad Boy Records, LaFace Records. So that's Babyface and them. So you see, this was all about money for Clive. I just think when people have these types of stories and everybody turns on them, it always makes me I'm just curious, like, what's the other side? And I felt like they didn't really get a fair deal. The press was completely against them. And now we find out that Clive Davis also was in on this too. And he just walks away from this with his hands clean. And I hear people praise this guy even till today. You need to start asking some damn questions about Clive Davis, damn it. Whether it's this situation or whether it's the Diddy situation. Why hasn't Clive Davis made a comment about Diddy getting arrested? That was his protege, no? Clive Davis was Diddy's boss. Don't you find it strange? Clive is quiet and he's been asked this question publicly. Look for it on YouTube. You'll find them, people asking him, and he just slowly walks away. Don't you find it strange that he wanted to continue on with the pre-Grammy party after Whitney died in the bathtub? This is someone you supposedly care about? No? Here's the part about the money. And this is where the exploitation comes in. Terry, what'd you say? In Diddy bed part? You said in Diddy bed partner. Listen to something he said here. They're like, why'd you do it? Listen.
I still have the right to choose not to do the song.
Why I did? First, because I got a check, and I never had a check in my hand before. No, I didn't say it. No, I didn't say that it's okay. I think if I wouldn't have done it, I would still live in a project. It's not okay, but you can choose project. You can choose project as a black guy. You can choose project or fame. And if people are there who seduce you for this, then it's a crime maybe. And I say I did something wrong, but I say not that our fans should do this or everybody who want to get up. This was a very special situation. We came from Germany. In Germany, there's no protection for artists. There's not a lawyer that you just can hire for $200. You have to understand, we were seduced, we were abused, and we felt very guilty. But we are here, Robin Fab is here, because we stopped it. Not Frank Farian, like you guys think. We stopped the whole thing. We said to Frank Farian, if you don't let us sing on the album, we don't do this anymore. We don't want to live like this. We don't want to be embarrassed every night by Arsenio Hall, who knew about. Of
course knew.
You know what I mean? We didn't want to go to clubs and every girl say, hey, you don't sing on the record. We wanted to stop. And that's why we said to Frank, if you don't let us sing, we won't do it. So he released the second album again. So then I told my lawyers, forbid the album. So we forbid the second album, and then he tried.
Sorry, the second album is already finished, and as you maybe have written in some press statements of Arista Records, this album will get released in January.
We'll stop it there, and I just wanted you to see the pan out here of the table so you can see how they were basically by themselves. Of course, Clive, I didn't expect Frank to be there, but Clive Davis not there. wanted nothing to do with it. Even if you look on Clive Davis Wikipedia page, when it talks about all the artists that he signed under Arista, guess who's not mentioned? Milli Vanilli is not mentioned. It's like it never happened. And I'm going to say this. I was watching that documentary, like, and I was watching it with the hubs, and I got mad. And I was just sitting there and I'm like, I'm mad. Because all these years later, people finally get to hear the other side of the story. And it sucks because I feel like it's a little too late for some, like, again, Rob, like, apparently this drove him into deep, deep depression. The part that he mentioned there about the money is where I want to get to with the exploitation. Clive Davis is one, but he's not the only one. It is not uncommon for these record executives to take advantage of people who need the money. They know you don't have a permanent place to live. You're sleeping in your friend's attic. The people who need money for food, they take advantage of people who need the money. It's not just Milli Vanilli. The same shit happened to New Edition. I mean, you had Maurice Starr, who was the manager of New Edition. Maurice Starr is a black guy, by the way, took advantage of New Edition, wasn't paying them what they were supposed to pay. This is why till this day, New Edition still goes on tour when they should be retiring. Recouped most of that money for himself. These kids going across the country with a #1 album, and they get home and they get a check for $1. Then when the New Edition walked away from Maurice Starr, you know what Maurice did to get back at them? He went and he signed an all-white group called New Kids on the Block. And he didn't take advantage of their money. You know why? Because their parents knew the business. So their parents read all the contracts. It's a shame. Sometimes your own people will do you dirty. But it's exploitation, and not just in the music business, but they were taken advantage of. Someone told me on Twitter, they were saying this recently. They said, if this would have happened to Milli Vanilli today, yes, some of the fans probably would have been upset and said, I'm canceling you. But they probably would have gained more fans and more support because they could have gone on TikTok, sang on their own. They would have had a super following on TikTok, and they'd still be able to stay in the game. But at that time, there was no social media. So when the press dissed you, you were done. And Clive Davis kept the money and kept on walking, honey. You sat right there and you watched these guys go up there and basically fight for the right to keep singing. And they actually can sing. That's the crazy part about all this. Fab went on to make his own album. They actually can sing. They wouldn't let them. And Clive Davis just sat there. Nothing to do with it, nothing. Just like he's sitting there right now. While Diddy's in jail, Clive Davis pretends to know nothing. Diddy who? I don't know this person. Now you don't know him. Whitney Houston dies in the bathtub. You continue to go on and have a damn Grammy party. Seriously? How do you go on drinking alcohol and partying with people when the person that you supposedly cared so much about this artist? Guys, exploitation is all around. It's not just in the music business. But one of the things I've continued to notice over time is that when it comes to Black artists, even if we own the label, we don't own the company. Clive Davis owned the company. And he was able to take the money that Milli Vanilli made for Arista Records and use that to build other labels all up under him. That's what I mean when I say he was Diddy's boss. And he just kept on keeping on like it was nothing. They were humiliated in front of the entire world. And nobody came to their defense. And that's the part that pisses me off. I didn't know this whole story back then. I didn't understand this whole story. I was a kid. I just knew the song sounded good. And I was just like, blame it on the rain. That's all I knew. And then one day I saw on TV, they said Milli Vanilli is not singing. They're not really singing. But again, I was a kid. I didn't really understand. What do you mean? And then they were gone. The way I understood it, they did something bad. Ooh. It's not just Clive Davis. It's not just Frank Farian. We need to find out who the others are. Because I don't like exploitation. And I really don't like when people are taken advantage of when they're down and out. And they knew these guys were down and out and they didn't have any money. And they preyed on that. And for Clive Davis to continue on knowing he knew that they weren't singing and they had the Grammy nomination, and you let them go out there and pretend to sing at the Grammys where everybody can tell you're not singing live. It's explosive. It blows the lid off of and to sell them out like that instead of just doing the right thing. Why didn't you get them a vocal coach? Why didn't you get them and help them to get to the point where they can just go ahead and sing? So we have to call out exploitation in all forms, whether it's the music industry, whether it's movie, TV, Hollywood, etc. We have to call it out in all forms. Otherwise, it'll continue to happen. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.